The Cowboys are standing at a massive, season-defining crossroads, and the choice is simple: either they finally stop the penny pinching and bust the budget, or they watch the championship window slammed shut and locked for good. We are talking about potential franchise-altering moves at receiver, linebacker, and edge rusher that could turn this roster into an absolute juggernaut overnight. If the front office is actually being honest with themselves about going all in and being busted budget aggressive, these are the dream targets that should be at the very top of the shopping list. We aren't just talking about filling holes, we are talking about bringing in the kind of thunder that changes the hierarchy of the entire NFC. Before we break down these massive, potentially landscape-shifting free agent targets, do me a huge favor: hit that like button, share this with a fellow fan who is tired of the off-season excuses, and subscribe right now so you never miss a single update on the moves that will define this decade of football. Let's start with the absolute lightning rod of the off-season, the wide receiver market. To be brutally honest, if you look at the open market right now, the options are surprisingly thin for a league that values the pass so highly. When you look past that elite, top-tier crust, you're left with guys who are serviceable, but they aren't going to strike fear into the hearts of a defensive coordinator. We're looking at names like Mike Evans, who is a legend but getting older, or Romeo Doubs and Jawan Jennings, who are solid contributors but aren't necessarily the guys you build an entire passing attack around. This leads us to a crucial, unavoidable reality for the front office: the best free agent wide receiver on the entire market is currently sitting right in our own locker room. Keeping George Pickens isn't just an option, it is a fundamental necessity for the survival of this offense. There isn't a single free agent available at any position, offense or defense, who is more valuable to this specific scheme and this specific quarterback than George Pickens. We cannot afford to let this turn into a franchise tag soap opera where he's holding out or playing disgruntled. The Pickens camp is going to be smart, they know the market. They are going to want a deal that clears the bar set by DK Metcalf, likely landing somewhere north of $33 million a year. It sounds like an eye-watering amount of money because it is, but when you look at the cost of 2 years on the tag, which is already going to run you over $31 million, you realize that a long-term deal is actually the only sane path forward. If the alternative is losing that game-breaking production or having a star who doesn't want to be here, you pay that premium in a heartbeat and you don't look back. This brings me to our first big question of the day, and I want you to be honest with me: would you be willing to pay George Pickens more than the Seahawks paid DK Metcalf to keep him home long-term and avoid the drama? Now, let's pivot to the defensive side of the ball, because if this team is going to actually contend, the secondary needs a massive injection of talent. The cornerback market offers some very intriguing, bust-the-budget possibilities that could completely redefine how we play coverage. If we want a versatile playmaker who can lock down the nickel or transition outside depending on the matchup, Alontae Taylor is the name that needs to be circled in red. He's projected at a 3-year, $33 million deal. Now, that is top-tier money for a slot defender, but his production is undeniable. He isn't just a coverage guy, he is a disruptor with elite production in tackles for loss. Plus, there's a massive coaching connection here that can't be ignored. Our new passing game coordinator, Derek Ansley, was his defensive coordinator in college. That kind of familiarity is worth its weight in gold when you're trying to integrate a high-priced free agent into a complex system. But maybe you want more than just a nickel specialist. Maybe you want a freak of nature who can take away half the field. In that case, Riq Woolen is the ultimate target. He is the prototype of what this organization has historically drooled over: tall, long, and lightning fast. He had some consistency issues and fluidity questions in Seattle recently, which might actually be a blessing in disguise because it could drive his price down to a 1-year, prove-it deal in the neighborhood of $9 million. If you want a high-upside gamble to play opposite our existing stars, Woolen is the ultimate lottery ticket. He has the straight-line speed to erase mistakes, and even if he isn't the shiftiest guy on the field, his length makes him a nightmare for any quarterback trying to fit a ball into a tight window. Now for the question of the day: if you were sitting in the general manager's chair and you could only sign one high-priced, bust-the-budget free agent this year, which position would you prioritize? Wide receiver, cornerback, or linebacker? I want you to head down to the comments right now and tell me exactly who you'd pick and the specific reason why. While we are on the subject of the secondary, we have to talk about the safety position. Historically, this team has treated the safety spot like an afterthought, rarely putting top-tier investment into it. But the beauty of the current NFL market is that other teams are doing the same thing, which means the market is soft. Reed Blankenship is a name that fits this defensive identity perfectly. He's reliable, he's a student of the game, and he has those obvious ties to Christian Parker. He's projected at a 2-year deal for around $14 million. That is an absolute bargain for a starting caliber player who can step in on day one and be a leader. On the flip side, if the front office finally decides to stop being cheap at safety, they should look at Brian Cook. He's been a staple for the Chiefs' championship runs, a reliable back-end piece that just doesn't make mistakes. While he isn't a household name for the casual fan yet, his projected $14 million a year salary reflects exactly how much the league's elite teams value his versatility. We've seen world-class safeties like Justin Simmons sit on the market longer than expected lately because the money just wasn't there. This creates a massive window of opportunity for us to snag a high-impact piece on a contract that won't cripple the cap. The running back room is another area where we have to make a cold, calculated decision between loyalty and a fresh start. The market is absolutely flooded with talent this year. Honestly, there might be more supply than there is demand, which plays right into our hands. You've got names like Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and Javonte Williams all potentially looking for new homes. Breece Hall is obviously the crown jewel, likely commanding over $10 million a year, but you have to ask yourself, is it worth the premium? When the difference between a top-tier guy like Hall and a reliable producer like Rico Dowell is only a few $1,000,000, it complicates the math. Javonte Williams has been the engine of this backfield, the guy who knows the protections and the rhythm of the offense. Replacing him just for the sake of a marginal upgrade might actually disrupt the chemistry of the huddle more than it helps the rushing average. Personally, I think you run it back with the guy who brought you to the dance, especially when the cost to keep him is projected to be so reasonable. But the temptation to grab a true home run hitter like Hall or even Kenneth Walker is going to be there all spring, especially if we see them tearing it up on other rosters. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room, the linebacker play from last season. Let's be real, it stunk. It was, quite frankly, painful to watch at times as we got gashed in the run game and exploited in the middle of the field. If we want to fix this defense, we have to be willing to pay the iron price for an elite linebacker. Devin Lloyd is the dream target. He is coming off a massive, career-defining year with 5 interceptions and elite playmaking stats across the board. He's a former first-round pick who is finally playing like the superstar everyone thought he could be. Because of that, he's likely going to spark a massive bidding war that could hit $20 million per year. If $20 million is too rich for your blood, Nico Dean is the pragmatic, high-value choice. He's a blitzing specialist who offers great run support and is projected at a much more manageable $8 million a year. He might not be the elite coverage player that Lloyd is, but he fits the physical profile of what this defense needs to stop being a doormat against physical offenses. And then there's the wild card, Demario Davis. Yes, he's 37 years old, but he plays like he's in his absolute prime. He might just want to go ring chasing with a powerhouse, and while we might not be the obvious choice for a ring chaser right now, we have to at least make the phone call. A 1-year deal for a leader and a legend like Davis could transform the entire culture of that defensive room and give the young guys a blueprint on how to be a pro. Finally, let's talk about the monsters off the edge. You can never have enough pass-quality rushers, and the names available this year are genuinely terrifying for opposing quarterbacks. Trey Hendrickson is the gold standard here. Even at 31, he is a production machine. We're talking about a guy who can drop nearly 18 sacks in a single season when he's right. The price tag is steep, over $25 million a year, and there are legitimate injury concerns, but that kind of raw production is so rare that you almost have to ignore the red flags. If you want someone younger with a potentially higher ceiling, Jalen Phillips is the target. In his recent stints, he was the king of quarterback pressures. While the raw sack numbers haven't fully exploded into the double digits yet, the underlying data, the hits, the hurries, the forced throwaways, suggests he is on the absolute verge of becoming one of the most dominant forces in the NFL. He's a bit of a medical risk, but if you're busting the budget, you're taking big swings. The reward could be a perennial All-Pro who anchors your line for the next 5 years. If those names are simply too expensive or the bidding wars get too out of hand, keep an eye on a familiar face, Clavon Chaisson. He was almost the pick years ago before a certain star receiver fell into our laps. After a very slow start to his career, he is finally starting to put it all together. He's jumped his production significantly over the last 2 seasons, and he's still only 26 years old. He would be a much more cost-effective way to bolster the rotation while still adding a high-pedigree athlete who is finally entering his prime. At the end of the day, the talent is out there. The names are on the board. The money is there if the front office has the stones to move it around and commit to a vision. The only question left is whether they have the courage to actually pull the trigger on these dream targets or if we're going to be sitting here next year talking about, what if? This roster is close, but close doesn't win rings. Bold moves win rings. Busting the budget wins rings. I want to hear from you one more time before we go. Looking at this entire list, from George Pickens to Trey Hendrickson, does this team need more help on the defensive line or in the secondary to finally get over the hump and bring a trophy home? Would you like me to go even deeper and break down the specific contract structures for these players to show you exactly how we can fit 3 of these superstars under the cap?